The Boeing aircraft scheduled to operate Flight 370 stood ready at Kuala Lumpur International Airport. Malaysian Airlines ground staff carried out thorough technical checks to confirm the plane's airworthiness. The jet had been fully fueled and equipped for a safe journey to Beijing. It was a routine workday, and no one on the ground could have imagined what would unfold just hours later. Passenger check-in began smoothly. All 227 travelers passed security screening without issue and boarded the plane. They were citizens of 14 countries, most of them Chinese nationals, many eagerly returning home. The crew consisted of 12 experienced individuals, including Captain Zahari Ahmad Shah and First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid, both of whom were highly regarded by their colleagues. The pilots and crew assumed their positions. Captain Zahari, with over 18,000 flight hours, confidently took command. Passengers settled into their seats and pre-flight preparations began. The atmosphere on board was calm. Everyone seemed relaxed, ready for departure. Final system checks were completed, and the aircraft was cleared for takeoff. Conditions were ideal. The sky was clear, and everything proceeded routinely. Within minutes, the aircraft reached cruising altitude, approximately 10,700 meters. Passengers went about their activities as the pilots contacted air traffic control to report their status. Everything remained normal as the aircraft headed northeast toward Vietnamese airspace. Pilots confirmed that the flight was proceeding as planned with no irregularities. Malaysian air traffic control continued monitoring the plane and reported no issues. The crew continued routine operations. The onboard data link system transmitted flight and engine status reports to the airline and ground stations. What no one realized at that moment was that this would be the final transmission. The system soon stopped functioning and no further data would be sent. This abrupt silence could only indicate a deliberate shutdown or a critical technical failure. Another ACARS report was scheduled to be sent within 30 minutes, but it never came. The disappearance of this regular data signal marked the beginning of a mysterious and troubling sequence. This was also the last time air traffic controllers would hear the crew's voices. First Officer Fariq Abdul Hamid radioed a routine farewell. "Good night, Malaysia 370. It was directed to Malaysian controllers. Just minutes later, the aircraft was due to transition into Vietnamese airspace, but the expected radio check-ins never came. Neither the crew nor the aircraft made further contact. No reports of emergencies were transmitted, and everything appeared on the surface to be proceeding normally. Malaysian controllers officially handed off the flight to their Vietnamese counterparts, who prepared to establish contact. However, the flight never appeared on Vietnamese radar. The plane's transponder, used to transmit its location and altitude, was suddenly turned off. The aircraft vanished from radar screens. At first, this wasn't considered critical, as planes can sometimes temporarily disappear in areas with poor signal coverage. But this time the signal was gone for good. This marked the beginning of a chain of inexplicable events. Despite the loss of civilian tracking, military radar continued observing the plane. And then it did something shocking. It made a sharp turn, veering off its planned northeast route toward Beijing. Instead, it began flying west. Such a maneuver could only mean one thing. The flight's path had been manually changed. But Vietnamese controllers were still unaware. Military radars continued tracking it as it crossed the Malaysian peninsula and approached the Strait of Malacca. Then came another deviation, and the aircraft disappeared from military radar as well. That was the final time its location was recorded by any system. The plane was now headed toward the Indian Ocean. With no signals and no radar, air traffic control had no idea where the aircraft had gone. Confusion quickly spread among controllers. The loss of the transponder and absence of radio contact only deepened the mystery. Yet, satellite systems continued picking up pings from the aircraft. Automated handshakes indicating that the plane was still in the air. These pings didn't include precise coordinates, but confirmed the aircraft's presence for hours after it vanished from radar. Air traffic controllers made repeated attempts to contact the crew. Other aircraft in the region also tried, unsuccessfully. One pilot reportedly managed to make a weak connection, but all he heard was static, interference that gave no answers. Early that morning, the satellite pings continued. Experts used these signals to reconstruct a hypothetical flight path. Using complex modeling, they concluded the plane could have flown either north toward Central Asia or south into the Indian Ocean. This data became crucial for future search efforts. By this point, Flight 370 should have been approaching Beijing, but the silence had become deafening. When no contact was established and the plane remained missing from all radars, Malaysia Airlines made a grim announcement. Flight MH370 was officially missing. 2 hours after it should have landed, the airline released a public statement confirming the loss of contact and the plane's failure to arrive. The world immediately turned its attention to the unfolding mystery. Media coverage exploded. Families of passengers gathered to demand answers. Social media lit up with fear, confusion, and hope. The public's anxiety was palpable. Though voice communication was lost, the satellite pings continued for hours. A final faint signal, likely sent as the aircraft ran out of fuel, was received. After that, nothing more came. It became clear that the situation was dire and demanded urgent international action. An enormous search operation was launched. Initial efforts focused on the South China Sea, where contact was first lost. But satellite data soon redirected the search to the southern Indian Ocean. Dozens of countries contributed resources, from warships and surveillance planes to satellites and sonar. Australia led coordination efforts in the southern zone. Massive areas of ocean had to be searched. Cutting-edge underwater technologies were deployed to map the ocean floor in detail. For over a year, the search yielded nothing. 16 months after disappearance, a piece of wreckage washed ashore on Reunion Island, a flaperon, part of the aircraft's wing. It was identified as belonging to a Boeing 777, confirming that the plane had crashed in the southern Indian Ocean. This was the first physical proof. More debris would later be found on other islands, fragments of wings and fuselage. All were matched to the missing jet. Despite this, the exact crash site remained elusive. Over the course of 2 years, international teams scanned over 120,000 square kilometers of ocean. Still, they could not locate the wreckage. In January 2017, Malaysia, Australia, and China announced the suspension of the search. Although the technology to continue existed, no new leads remained. The investigation could not definitively determine what caused the crash. Several theories emerged: mechanical failure, terrorism, or hijacking, but no concrete evidence supported any one explanation. The most widely accepted theory is that someone deliberately diverted the plane from its course. Investigators believe Flight MH370 was intentionally flown off route, possibly by one of the pilots or an unknown person on board. Despite extensive searches and dozens of theories, the truth about the fate of Flight MH370 remains unknown. The aircraft disappeared, taking with it hundreds of questions, and perhaps the last great mystery of modern aviation.